Alderman Williamson, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderman Onowitz.
Here.
Alderman Kotar, Alderwoman Green, Chairman.
She's here. I'll say that she's here.
Chairman Tyus.
Present.
Alderman Williamson, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Kotar, 4 present. We have a quorum.
First of all, we have Mr. Julian Bush here, who is our city councilor. I want to apologize because we usually have it a little bit better together here at the Board of Aldermen. But we are under undue stress because we're missing several key personnel. We're hoping to resolve that in the next few months, I guess. But I wanted you to come speak to us because we at the Board of Aldermen feel like that sometimes we're not being properly represented by City Council, that we are left out. That, in fact, I've had one of the city councilors tell me personally, well, we represent the mayor's office. I was like, you need to read the charter. Okay, so when we didn't have an attorney, when the mayor took our last attorney over to be her chief of staff, I actually had some written correspondence from one of the people who was assigned to help us out. But he didn't want to go on record about who you represented and what happened with the conflict, because I sent this question, the very letter that I sent to you, I sent that to him when he said something about that, and he didn't want to go on record. So I do like records. I am a very rules person. I always known you to be, I guess, that too. I guess I came here and first time in '91, Jim Wilson might have still been the city councilor back then, I think. I think he left when my first year.
He left when Freeman Bosley was.
Oh, right, but
When was Freeman?
I came when Ben Chamber was still the mayor.
All right, yeah. Jim Wilson, he was city councilor until the conclusion of Freeman's term.
Of Chambers, right. So I was, yeah, Vince left in '93. That's when Freeman came. So I've been through a lot of city councilors. I wanted to get some clarity about the representation and how we deal with things. And I also had some real questions when I looked at the budget about the settlements and the police settlements and putting more money in when the police win their criminal suits, but then we lose civilly or we settle. So thought that you as the head city councilor, when I came here, I guess you were assistant or were you
An associate.
Associate by then, okay. So we have a long history together. I respect you greatly, and I want to thank you for coming before the committee.
Well, thank you for those kind remarks, and I'm delighted to be here, actually, and talk with you and try to answer your questions.
Okay.
And I actually have a couple of things for you that I want to talk to you about before I leave, if you remind me before I
Great.
leave.
So I really would just like for you to give us first an overview about how you see the city councilor's office working and how you interact with, and I kind of put some things in the letter so kind of know where I'm looking for, and then I will let the committee members before me ask questions, okay?
All right, the city councilor essentially guided by 3 sets of materials. The city councilor is guided by the charter. There are charter provisions that regulate and establish and regulate the office, the law department, and the office of city councilor. So you begin with the charter. There are also ordinances that regulate the law department and the city councilor. And that's something I want to talk to you about, because I want to point out to you, they are badly out of date. They really need to be updated, and I would love to encourage you to do whatever, to take a look at those and bring those up to date. They're partly out of date. They refer to buildings that no longer exist. They refer to courts that no longer exist. There are other provisions that could be followed but have not been followed for many decades. Yeah, it's definitely time to take a look at those, and I encourage you to do that, and I would be happy to work with you to work on that project. And third, although I don't think it's fully appreciated, but as you know, because you're a lawyer, there are rules that regulate the conduct of all lawyers in the state of Missouri. And there are rules that particularly address the situation with organizational lawyers, corporate lawyers. And those apply to government lawyers as well as private lawyers and private corporations. And there are even some provisions of those rules that address in particular the situation with government lawyers. And they're all, those last ones are very vague because they are very difficult to apply, and there's much uncertainty involved in it. I think that you are particularly interested in who I believe the city council represents and who the city council's client is. In my view, subject to a couple caveats that I will attempt to remember to address, but you remind me if I don't, the city council represents the city of St. Louis.
Yes.
Which is a corporation, all right? Now, so, subject to caveats, the client of the city councilor is not the mayor, it's not anybody on the board of aldermen, it's not the comptroller, it's not the street director. The client is the corporation, the city of St. Louis. However, the city of St. Louis is an abstraction. The city of St. Louis can't talk, it can't listen, it can't make decisions. It acts through people. And if you look at, I think it's Rule 4, which is the rule that regulates lawyers and talks about organizational clients, it recognizes the fact that a city is an organization, including a city, is an artificial organization and has constituents. The constituents for a private corporation would be its board of directors, it would be its officers, it would even be its employees, it might under certain circumstances be shareholders. So the city of St. Louis has constituents as well. That would be its officers, such persons as the mayor, the comptroller, department heads. Certainly, it includes, right, at a very high level in the hierarchy, the board of aldermen, and it includes actually all of its employees within the scope of their employment. So the mayor is not, it's a general proposition, my client, and you, ladies and gentlemen who are on the board of aldermen, you are not my clients either, but you are constituents. You, the mayor, the street director, you're all constituents of the client. Now that's very abstract, and sometimes it's hard when you get down to specific facts to how you implement that. But the client that I represent, and the lawyers in my office represent, is the city of St. Louis, the corporate body. Now, under the charter, I think as you pointed out, the law department has certain obligations to the constituents. It's my obligation to represent the city of St. Louis. That's very straightforward, I think. If the city of St. Louis should be involved in litigation, it's also my responsibility under the charter to answer questions that might be posed to me by certain constituents. Not all of the constituents have the right to ask questions. You might have an individual cop on the street,
Right.
a sanitation worker. They're not entitled to my opinion, even though they're a constituent. But certain people are. The mayor's entitled to my opinion. I believe the heads of all departments are entitled to my opinion. And the members of the Board of Aldermen are entitled to my opinion. Beyond the scope identified in the charter, there were other provisions in the city code that govern my relationship with the members of the Board of Aldermen. I could open this up and tell you more specifically, but I'm going to rely on my recollection unless you want me to address it specifically.
Yeah, are you 50? You better be careful,
Yeah.
okay?
But I do recall, and I'm pretty you're right, my memory is not what it once was, but there are provisions, for example, that call upon the city councilor to help the members of the Board of Aldermen with their bills. I don't think it necessarily says it drafts the bills, but if you have a bill you've introduced and it needs some help, that's our obligation to help you with it. And I think you indicated that maybe we haven't been giving you the service that you seek. I regret to hear that. I wasn't aware that there was a belief that we're not giving you adequate help. If you have any specific complaints, I would like to hear about it, because I'd like to make that better. But absolutely, I recognize that as the obligation of the city councilor to help you with your bills that you might introduce. I think Alderman Green, I tried to give her some help with one of her bills last session. And I believe, I hope, other members of my staff have been helping you with your bills when you called upon them to do that.
Can I let me stop you right there for a minute?
Sure.
Do you have some, so I don't like to always call the city councilor.
Right.
Do you have somebody assigned to that task if an alderperson wants to request service?
You know, we really don't have that specifically now. There was when I came into the office a year ago, there was a lawyer, Nolan Sharkey, I think he was really assigned the function of helping the
Right.
Board of Aldermen.
Exactly.
And then I guess when your clerk left, he kind of got detached down here to work as your clerk.
He was
for a
our
while.
clerk/lawyer, which I always was opposed to that, and now we got rid of that again. When I came here, we didn't have it like that.
But we have not filled his position yet. We wanted to, but, as you probably heard, there's budget problems. And we're hoping to fill that position after July 1st, when the new budget year begins. So maybe that's possibly why we haven't been giving you the service that we think we ought to be. But
So should then the Board of Aldermen call you, then if we need service? See, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that we have any kind of procedure put in place.
I would be, if you, depends on how, well, right now, as long as we don't have somebody assigned, yes, you should.
Okay.
Yes, you should call me, and I will have somebody else, or, depending on the circumstances, I might work out of it myself, or I'll find somebody who's appropriate, problem. That's an overview. Now, you mentioned the fact that an attorney in my office described you off the record, I guess, described the city councilor as the mayor's lawyer. And again, as I've said, the city councilor is not the mayor's lawyer. The city councilor is the city's lawyer, but with a caveat. The mayor, under the charter, has general supervision over all the executive affairs of the city. And so I regard myself as under the mayor's general supervision. So I am not her lawyer, but I act under her general supervision. And that could be kind of a, how do I say this?
Slippery slope?
I don't sure it's a slippery slope, but it can be tricky area, let me put it, tricky.
Because she cannot terminate except for cause.
She cannot terminate
And
but
then
for cause.
And then I think maybe, does the Board of Aldermen have to come in? Is that for you or just for the mayor? Because we can terminate the mayor.
There
I
is a
have to look up.
provision that applies to the police commissioner, and I think it's the excise commissioner. It's been interpreted that they can, I think it says they can be, I think that has to be brought before the Board of Aldermen to determine. I don't think.
No, the excise commissioner
excise
doesn't,
doesn't.
but they did it
Well, there was a
illegally, and that's why
lawsuit.
he's back.
Well, yeah, there's a lawsuit that established that.
Right.
And the police commissioner is like the excise commissioner. I say this with some hesitancy, I haven't looked into it. I have not felt it was necessary to determine what the circumstances would be under which I'd be fired.
Okay,
I hope
that's
never-
fine.
I hope never to have to examine those. But I know I can only be fired for cause. Exact
Right.
procedure, I don't know. I don't think it goes to the Board of Aldermen, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay, all right.
So, that's a kind of a general overview of how I regard the city councilor and the law department. And I know from your letter, you'd also like me to address settlements, budgets, and so on and so forth, which I'll be happy to do, but is there anything you'd like me to talk about, or any questions you'd like me to answer about what I've done over already?
Okay, this, the committee, would you like us to talk about this first and then let him talk about settlements? Do you want to have it divided into?
Either
Okay, do anybody have any questions right now? I do.
I mean, and it's.
Alderman Cohen?
If I may.
Okay.
So I've actually of late been getting requests
Oh,
from constituents that have been filing like insurance claims with the city. The city's self-insured. Those get referred over to your office. They're either not hearing back in regards to those claims. Is there a specific person that's working on that in your office?
Wait a minute. Are you asking about the settlements?
No, I'm asking about, I'm not asking about settlements, I'm asking about self-insurance
Oh, okay.
with the city.
Okay.
So, like, they're insurance claims, not settlements through court cases.
You're talking about if city.
Like a
garbage
trash
knocks
truck,
over
which is, the
somebody's
trash truck
trash.
is the overwhelmingly, the trash trucks are overwhelmingly.
This has been a problem, this is done in my office. We have a claims department, the woman who's in charge of it is a woman named Lovey Davis. And it has been a source of problems in recent months. I'll tell you what I think is the problem. When you're a citizen and you have a minor kind of claim, you know, a sanitation truck scrapes your car, a police car scrapes your car, somebody hits your fence, so on and so forth. The way it's sort of set up to make a complaint is, as I understand it, is you go on the city web page and it sends you to a certain department, and they're supposed to make some sort of investigation and send a report over to my investigator, and it's gotten messed up, frankly. I can't get down to the weeds in it, but out in the departments and divisions, and a lot of these come from
Refuse.
refuge.
Mm-hmm.
They're not filling out the claim properly to get it to my office. It's sort of, it's a problem with training and using the data processing system. And we've been working on that for the last couple weeks. Todd Walterman has tried to get involved, and it's a matter, at least
Now
from
you're
our
willing to.
perspective in the law department, it's not coming to us properly from most of the departments and divisions. But it's being worked on, and I will tell you candidly, I probably shouldn't say this, but I mean, there are some people that, you know, contact their alderman, and their alderman contacts the city councilor, and you kind of stimulate some activity on it to get it investigated properly. But there is a systems problem with that, and it's being worked on, and I hope it'll be better soon. But
So I have about 3 of them right now. Should I be forwarding those to you, or, I
if you
mean,
forward them to me, I wish you wouldn't, but I'll take them. I mean, I will pass.
I
them
wish
on.
I didn't have to.
You know what?
Right.
Because if you forward to me, what I will do is I will forward them to Levy Davis. I would not be offended if you would contact her directly.
If you could send her, you know, contact information, I'd be more than happy to.
Her, I think, I would assume that if you just go on your city email, you type in Levy Davis, her email address would pop up just like yours would.
I don't get into the like whole Google the city email thing,
So I'm gonna give you a little hint. So our booklets that they give us from Darlene, she sent it to, she also sends it digital. If you put that on.
I've never
and-
gotten a digital version of that.
Oh, because I
ever.
read, so I'll send it to you. So I
And
raised so much
The
hell.
last
heck.
one I remember getting is probably 2 years old.
Well, I have the new current one, and I'll
So-
send it to you because then it syncs with your phone. So if even with your phone, if you look up somebody
Yeah.
and you
No,
say,
that'd be great.
I'll send
never
it to you.
use the city Gmail, your city Gmail?
I don't log into it, so
Okay.
it's,
Well, then you can't use it.
I,
Yeah.
so it's on my phone, but I don't have access to the directory.
Okay.
Right,
for it.
but I have the actual directory, which I have asked for every year, and in fact, this year, they said, okay, Alderwoman, because I asked for it, I'm like, why, don't send me this paper, I don't need that. And you actually can put it on your phone or your iPad, mine is all cross-referenced, and then when you do a search through, and you put a name in, it pulls up not only what's in your phone, but also what's in the
That's
city
great.
directory. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, end of
happy with
tutorial. I taught the young people something, I'm good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, you're young enough that I would have thought you would be able to tell us. But you
So
made a conscious
technology
decision
is set
not to
up,
do that.
well, it's set up on my phone, but it does not have access to the directory, you know, that is available if you were to actually sign into the computer. So,
Okay. Any other questions, Alderman?
no, not at the moment.
I have a kind of
Alderman Green?
follow-up question to that. So I've had a number of constituents who have filed their claims, and I don't think I've had a single one where it's actually, like, has ruled that the city did anything wrong.
Exactly.
And there's been times where, like, it's caught on a camera, and, you know, of a refuse truck taking out somebody's garage, and it's, like, what is the burden of proof for responsibility?
No, I mean, I will share with you that I have seen some, I mean, some claims are meritorious and some aren't.
Yeah.
But I have seen some claims where I have felt that they were improperly denied, and we took a second look at them.
Okay. So
But this is
there
not a case where the customer's always right. Sometimes
Right.
they're making claims that are not meritorious. But I have seen myself a couple where I felt the claims were meritorious and were denied when they ought not to be denied, so.
Okay. Is there an appeals process?
No. What's happened, I mean, a couple, it's reached me that there was a complaint, I took a
Okay.
second look at it.
Okay.
If you feel that there's a meritorious claim, let me know, and we'll take a second
Okay.
look at it. But, you know, just because there's a complaint doesn't mean it doesn't matter.
Right.
That's all.
There was one in particular that I was floored that
Let me
it
know
was denied.
if
so-
it's repeated.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone else have questions? Annie? Alderwoman,
Just-
I'm sorry, Rice.
It's okay, thank you. So is there a reason that there isn't an appeals process on that? If it's just one person who's making the finding there?
This will sound funny for a law department, we're just not that bureaucratic. We have people who make the decision, we make people, I mean, I don't, it's not a part of the office I'm intimately involved in. There are 3 or 4 claims adjusters, I guess, if one of the subordinate adjusters makes the decision that what's happened is when I have learned the decisions are made that doesn't, I think bears a second look, I have Lovey Davis, who's in charge, take a look at it. There's also, and maybe this is part of the problem, there's a lawyer, our litigation manager, I guess, is in charge of all that. And he has had some serious health problems, has missed a substantial part of it last year, and is not here right now. He's had cancer and I think kidney removed, and that might be a little bit of a problem. But there is no formal appeals process, but, if there's a reason to take a second look at it, we
Sure.
would.
Sure, I guess my reason for asking that is when trying to decide what our constituents need to access through us versus what they should be able to access on their own without having to come through their alderman.
Well, if they should make their claim themselves, I mean, and if they're dissatisfied with their response, I think, my impression is you all operate differently. Some of you, you have your neighborhood.
The NISs or the NSOs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of, some of you feel that you want a lot of things to go through them, and some of you don't. But I mean, if I hear something requires a second look from an alderman or a neighborhood NIS, I mean, we'll take another look at it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any follow-ups? Well, I'll do. So just in following up on this, my neighbor who's on the other side of the alley from me, I watched the trash truck lift up the dumpster, hit her gutters on her garage, because I guess almost about 90% of the people on my alley have garages and use them. And encouraged her to turn it in. She called me, of course, or walked around, I can't even remember what. They still denied her. And I'm like, excuse me, I saw this, okay? Not anything where we think. And if you look and see where the dumpsters are, they're gonna keep hitting it because the dumpster's in a crazy place, okay? And unless that person is very careful, you're gonna hit her gutters each time. So I am going to call you personally, because I told her to leave it just like that. I have pictures of it. If you look at the placement of the dumpsters, you know they did it. So I don't get.
Don't call me, send me an email.
Okay, well, that's what I do
It's
anyway.
easier- it's easier
Right,
for you to
right.
deal with
And I'll
it.
send you with all the particulars.
Yeah.
Because I saw it myself. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have always wondered, just what they asked you, how do you, what is the process then that you're saying no? And what happens is our constituents get very frustrated and feel that it's very unfair. And so you hear this every time I see her, I almost have to go the other way because of this, okay? And so I just hadn't really, I had not gotten into it, but now that they're bringing this up, it really is, I know that they did it. And I would say maybe it's on us to set up some kind of, ask you to set up some kind of appeals process as a member of the Board of Aldermen, because there should be, that's one of the things I have with the treasurer's office, I've often said to them, and they do have at least appeals process, is that if it just sits there, you just frustrate people. It's why I don't use Citizen Service Bureau, because they'll come back and say it's taking care of it, and it isn't, so it drives me crazy. So I'm from old school, where I just call the department heads and say, get out there and get that done. Okay, so I think that really makes the constituents very unhappy when they don't hear
Well,
back.
I think there's two aspects of it. One is people will make a claim that's denied, and they believe sometimes probably correctly and sometimes incorrectly that it should have been, we should have got a settlement. But probably often just as frustrating is they make the claim and they never hear it back. And as I've said, we have fallen down on the job there. There is a systems problem between the departments, like such as the refuse streets and the city councilor's office. There is a communications problem. The system has not been working properly. But we've known that. We became aware of that 3 or 4 weeks ago, and there's been some work on it. And I don't know if the problem is is better or cured, or I'm not quite sure. But Todd has been working on that, and it's maybe it's a training problem. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it's a communication problem, getting the information to the law department from the operating divisions.
Okay, well, and so it kind of surprises me that a law department wouldn't have clear and concise instructions. This is how you make a claim, and then this is how it's denied. And pretty much in law, that's pretty boilerplate standard kind of thing. So that's a little surprising. I think that should be remedied. So that's just my suggestion. I want to get back to one question that I had about who city council represents, and you said the city, but you also have to advise all the different entities, the Board of Aldermen, the committee chairs, and things
Yes.
like that. So I guess my question becomes, so if the city is being sued, say one of our ordinances is being sued, and so it becomes the city councilor's position to defend, I guess, the ordinance that's been passed by the Board of Aldermen and signed by the mayor. Okay, so then what happens, and I've had this happen to me before, when you get subpoenaed I got subpoenaed, I think the mayor, one of the other mayors got subpoenaed, and they ended up sending me to another lawyer, which they paid for, okay? Because they said, well, we're representing the mayor, whoever they were representing at that time, and so they could not represent me at the same time. I don't know if we had different positions, I can't even remember. I know I ended up going to David, somebody that used to work there, I don't know, it's been years ago. So how do you see that whole interaction, okay? When you're trying to represent the city, but there's the mayor maybe involved, or the member of the Board of Aldermen, or whatever, what happens with that?
Well, that's a good question. So the client is the city of St. Louis, generally speaking. People who work for the city are sued from time to time.
Correct.
The mayor gets sued. Aldermen don't get sued often, but I guess you get sued from time to time. People who drive city vehicles get sued. Policemen get sued frequently. Lots of people get sued who are employees or officers of the city of St. Louis. Typically, the city council will represent employees of the city who are sued. And typically, there's no conflict of interest between the interests of the city and its employees, typically. But there are circumstances under which, where there is a conflict of interest between the interests of the city and its employees, or between two employees who might be sued. As you know, because you're a lawyer, if there's a conflict of interest, as a general proposition, one lawyer can't represent conflicting interests or conflicting parties. There are circumstances where a lawyer can do that, but it normally involves obtaining what's called informed consent. In other words, the lawyer explains to the people,
Right.
you've got this conflict, this is what's involved in it. Would you like for me to, would you give your consent for me to represent both of your interests? And that can happen, but there are times, I don't think there are often, where there are conflicts of interest that would prevent the city council from representing both the city and one of its employees, or two different employees of the city of St. Louis. It doesn't happen often, because we really are one organization. We're all on the same team, although from time to time, maybe it doesn't seem that way, but we are all on the same team. When that happens, I think it's happened one time since I've been here. You may remember, the controller didn't want to sign the Scott
that's what's
Trade
sort of-
Center, and that
right.
was a situation where the city's interests were adverse, at least.
Were you here for the
city's
shame on?
interests were adverse to the controller, because the controller did not want to follow the city ordinance that commanded her to sign certain documents. In her judgment, it was not her it was not something she ought to do. So in that circumstance, we did arrange for an attorney to represent Ms. Green. So that is, in my mind at least, in the unusual circumstances where there's a conflict of interest, that's how that should be addressed.
Okay,
And that
so,
was your experience personally, I guess, a few years ago when that happened to you.
and I haven't got reimbursed, that's one of my questions, because, okay, and I will be sending my bill over to you guys. I'm owed a lot of money by this city, I always put me last, my husband does not like it. But I also remember, so back when the Vince Shamo as mayor, Vervis Jones as comptroller, them fighting all the time. I was public defender then, okay, and right then starting to realize the conflict that could come when the comptroller and the mayor differ. And I was just wondering if you ever found, were there any legal opinions, or do you know about any legal opinions about what happens with that? And how did you decide, or you weren't there, but Jim Wilson, how do you decide you are representing the mayor versus the comptroller versus?
I was here as a young lawyer, and I do remember those conflicts, and back in those days, not only was a lot of tension between the mayor and the comptroller, the board of aldermen, there were
Yes.
tension too. And I think that's one of the reasons, a couple of things happened. That's why the position of, nobody did, but you and I remember Bruce Nangle.
I do.
suppose.
No, right.
Remember?
Well, Larry was here as our marshal then.
So Bruce was the parliamentarian, but he was a lawyer, and his position was transformed into the position of counsel to the Board of Aldermen. I think that was done because there was a perception that there would be occasions where the board would feel that it needed to have an attorney whose undivided loyalty was to the board itself. And similarly, I think I'm right in saying this, but there's been a position of legal counsel for the comptroller.
That it was created back then, exactly.
Who was the first person who did that? I can't remember her name.
No, was it Denise Watson West?
Denise Watson West.
Right, who goes, say we're old.
And I think that position's been more or less.
She left, she was a prosecutor,
That's
circuit
been
attorney.
maintained all through the years, and
Right.
Mr. Washington, Kerry Washington, I think, occupies that position at the present time, does he not?
I don't
I
know.
think he does.
Okay,
He's a young lawyer. I'm not sure what, his title may not be counsel to the Board of Aldermen, counsel to the comptroller, but he's a lawyer, works in the office. And so that is a partial solution to the problem. But when you have a case where an ordinance is under, say between the comptroller, Scott Trade Center, there was a dispute, you could think of a dispute between the mayor and the comptroller, but, the city's position is really defined by its ordinances. And so, the reason we took this, did not represent our Ms. Green's side, is because it's our duty to defend the city, and the city's position is defined by its ordinances. So, let's say the mayor didn't like an ordinance and she didn't want to attack it, and say, you adopted an ordinance that she thought was not valid. I wouldn't represent her. She would have to that would be a conflict. But since I represent the city, and the city's ultimate voice is its ordinances, I would defend the ordinance.
Okay?
The mayor would have to get a lawyer, just like the comptroller had to get a lawyer, because there would be a conflict of interest. That's the way I see it.
Oh, I see it too, and that's what happened to, that didn't happen to me. The acting city councilor did not defend my ordinance and listen to the mayor, which is why he can never appear before me, okay? So I'm very upset about that, thought about making a bar complaint about it. Because exactly, that's why I'm asking you this question exactly right now. And that's why I told you in my letter, don't bring him, okay? Because I think he acted very unprofessionally, and I want to use his name because I've said it to his face, okay? I do see the city councilor as representing our ordinance, and that isn't what happened there. Anybody who knows me, I got a long memory, and it won't go away, okay? Because we have a gas station on our corner that should not be there. And so that was why I was asking that question. So do you see at any time us ever having a conflict office, or do you see that each individual departments will kind of just add their own lawyers, and doesn't that get burdensome
I
and
don't think-
expensive?
No, I don't think each department or division of city government should have its own lawyer. I was gone from here for 22 years, so I don't really know how many problems are. We are, to my mind, one team. There shouldn't be a lot of conflicts. The year I've been here, I believe the Scott Trade Center was the only situation where you had that conflict. And I'm talking now here about the municipal corporation. There's been litigation involving the treasurer, who's a county officer. That's a different kind of creature. But for a municipal corporation, I believe conflicts are rare. People have different ideas about things, but I think something that would, I don't think there's been any litigation between the Board of Aldermen and the mayor. That could happen, but it would be a rare event. So I think it would be a foolish expenditure of public money to give every division of the city government its own full-time lawyer. What would they do?
That's why I said, do you since I was a public defender and I discovered the conflicts at the public defenders, I thought that was a good thing. I actually was there with the whole same thing with the bridge. I was there I left right after that. So the defendants that came in with the pushing off the bridge, we had the PDs represent, then we had the special PDs.
Right.
And then what I didn't understand was why the circuit attorney didn't have something similarly, because I always thought the circuit attorney representing the police and then having to prosecute the police was a burden that was too heavy. In fact, I remember when George Peach actually went after a police officer and they had the blue flu. And that's when it was brought home to us as public defenders that, wow, if you make the police mad and you're a prosecutor, you are thrown under the bus, okay? So I've always thought that being able to separate that would have been a very good idea and supported that. So I just was wondering, remembering Shamel and Jones and the intensity, and I believe that's, the judge allowed him to hire his own counsel after that. I just wondered if there was any chance that maybe we could have like a little department that was a conflict, so if there was things where we could resolve them without having to get a lot of outside counsel. I'm also very concerned about that now a lot of outside counsel writes our development board bills, and been doing it since I came here in '91. That was the first time I discovered that, because I voted no on the Rams deal when I got here, and found out somebody else wrote it. And so it's a concern to me that we get these big, thick documents that the attorney for the person who wants it is writing it. We get them at the last minute. I almost universally vote no. If there's one no vote, it's mine. And mostly I've read it too, so I don't just vote no, I read it. And of course they write it for what's in their best interest, okay? The whole thing with the Rams about being able to leave after so many years. I stood on the floor for an hour talking about this is the most ridiculous loophole I have ever seen in my life, okay? I actually was on convention and tourism, so I actually got to question them then, because it started out, I think, with Walter Payton and a whole nother group before it ended up with who we, right. But, so it's just of concern to me that we have so many city councilors, but they're not really writing our development bills. And is that because we really don't have enough city councilors to do that kind of thing, and we don't have anybody specialized in that? Or what happened? Why is Lewis and Rice or Thompson Coburn or whoever, why are they writing our development bills? And most certainly, that is not in our best interest to me.
I have no answer for that. I don't know where the development bills, whoever introduces the bill, the alderman who introduces it, he has, or she has, whoever prepared that she wants to. I think, so you would have to ask your colleagues, why are you having so-and-so write your bill for you?
Because the mayor is given those, our colleagues don't go and say, oh, I want to do this, and go get somebody from Lewis and Rice and those different people, because the mayor directs that and gives it to them, and they don't do that. That comes right from room 200. And I've been here long enough that right where you're sitting, we actually subpoenaed a mayor over here. So on my birthday, April 29th, okay? That my colleagues is not doing that. And I just wondered what your thoughts were as a city councilor about us having, and as an attorney, having someone else write board bills that are so complex, and then we come and have to, and especially we get them sometimes the day of, or introduction or whatever, and then they move through the system, what's NGA, move through the system in 3 weeks. Okay. How in the world, non-attorneys, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take it apart, and I want to thank Professor Greenfield at Washington University, because I can read, okay? And I actually understand a lot of it. My contracts lawyer. But most of the people are not lawyers here, and that is so hard. And so how could we better use the city councilor to just protect our own interests is what I'm asking.
Well, under the city code, as I said, you have if you want us to give you an opinion about a bill that's been introduced, we will do that, absolutely. A complicated development bill, we would need more than 48 hours also to do it. We have, in my office, we have 3 lawyers who were assigned to the St. Louis Development Corporation.
Yes.
And I would suppose most of those bills really come out from that direction. And I would think that we have looked at them. People in my office have looked at them. I don't really supervise them very closely.
Okay.
They're over at 1520 Market, and they work closely with the development people, but I would suppose
So then
those bills have been looked at.
they put
by
their
those
stamp of
folks.
approval on them.
Well, I would suppose they've had their input.
Okay.
I would be surprised that maybe that they were consulted on those kinds of things, but I don't know.
Okay. And then Alderman from the 23rd asked, not for a written opinion, but the time when we were all voting about Nicole, the auditor, coming in and doing an audit. And so I was interested in your response, because we cannot just pass a bill here to spend money without going through the proper procedure. And in fact, there is case law, which I can give you, that says if we do it, yeah, I know you know. So if we do it, the comptroller does not have to pay it, because it's not. So I was interested in your reply, because I thought that was not the Julian Bush that I knew, okay?
What was my reply?
Well, yes, you can do it.
No.
But you didn't, you did, what I missed was, but she should know that the comptroller doesn't have to pay this, okay?
Yeah, that's definitely my opinion.
I know, but that wasn't in there.
In my opinion, well, I wasn't asked that.
I know.
But, yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think could the Board of Aldermen ask by resolution, ask the state auditor?
Sure.
Of course. Actually, anybody on the street can ask for
Sure.
anything they want, right?
Right,
But if I was advising the state auditor,
okay.
I cautioned her, yeah.
Okay, well,
Well,
so,
but it would have been a caution, I might have said, there's no legal obligation to pay. On the other hand, they wouldn't have asked you, they didn't want it done, and reasonably, you could expect them to appropriate the money to pay for it, but.
but they didn't ask.
You're bearing some risk.
But they didn't, because the ways, that was the Board of Aldermen, it was not the ENA that approved that, okay? That was the
Right.
Board of Aldermen.
Right.
So, and I'm gonna ask you for me, if I ever ask you for opinion, please give me the full thing, the part that I don't wanna hear, okay? You tell me, but Sharon, Alderwoman Tyus, yes, you can ask for this, but here's what you need to know on the other side, okay?
Well, I felt I was telling you what you needed to know. I wasn't telling the state auditor what she needed to know,
Okay.
because she is the one who is bearing risk.
Well, I think that we need to know that too, if we ask an elected official to do something, and, so I know that I've read the case law, says she doesn't have to, and where they didn't pay stuff, okay, so for me, I would want that, even that other side, that's just me, okay, I think it does you no good. Patrick Connigan was here when I was here much of the time, and what I liked about Patrick is he told me straight, I want to know the other side is like your client to me, not, if you get, when I was a public defender, you get in court and then they say, but this is the part they didn't tell you. So I think that would have made some difference to some of the aldermen, how they voted, to really know that this is not, that if the comptroller says no, unless both the president and the mayor say yes, then it doesn't have to get paid, okay? So that's just my own suggestion. Okay, so the other part that we wanted to talk about were the settlement, and I wanted to hear about the settlement and the civil cases, and is that more than the police and how that works?
Well, you asked, where is the money for it in the budget? It's in two places. There's a, let's see if I can find it. It's in the city councilor's budget.
Okay, is that for everyone? Or just the police?
Yes, except possibly the county. There's a budget called the 1010 budget,
Right,
and that has $2 million in it every year. It's called the PFPC contribution, and I can talk to you about what PFPC is if you like.
okay.
But there's another budget, city council budget, I call that the 1010 budget, maybe they're all the 1010 budget. There's 13940s, city council, that's what's called the department. And has had $2 million in it for many, many years, I believe. And there's another budget, 1390001, which is called City Councilor Police Unit. And that, in recent years, has had $1 million in it. The budget that's been submitted to you by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment has $3 million in it this year. And that's also called the PFPC contribution.
Well, I'm sorry, so it has 3 million in the 01, just by itself?
It has,
Or
the
total?
police unit, it's $3 million in the budget that's been introduced into
This
the board
year?
for this year.
Okay.
That's up from $1 million.
Right, so
which
we added
has
2 more
been-
million,
Right.
okay?
Well, the Board of EA has added $2 million. You may or may not. That's up to you.
Right,
Yeah. So that's the primary source of funds to pay judgments and settlements. You might wonder what PFPC is. You might know what it is. Alderman Green wondered what it was, and I wrote her an opinion describing what it is. And if you're interested, I will
I
tell
am.
you what it is, but, so that's the source of most of the funds that are used to pay settlements and judgments.
And you said you would tell us, can you tell us now, is it
I
too
will tell
long?
you if you
Okay.
would like.
It's complicated.
It's murky is another word to describe it. So, back in the 1980s, there was a not-for-profit corporation set up called Public Facilities Professional Corporation of the City of St. Louis. It's called PFPC. It was incorporated by some city employees under its articles of incorporation. It has no members. Some not-for-profits have members, some don't. Some have self-perpetuating boards of directors. And this declares itself to be a self-perpetuating board of directors, but oddly also says the directors are, I think it's the comptroller, the city councilor, the mayor, maybe the president of the Board of Aldermen and the budget director, or their designees, which is inconsistent with the idea that it'd be a self-perpetuating board of directors. So this corporation exists, and over the years, basically, money's been shoveled into this corporation, including these two line items. You know, the police unit obviously is a new business. It's just beams, I thought maybe turn this thing off. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what happens is money gets shoveled to PFPC during the course of the year. Sometimes this is not enough money to pay all the settlements and judgments, and the comptroller finds other money, or the board of the EDA finds other money to shovel it over to this corporation. And it has other clients, like, I think like,
Like the Port Authority.
Port Authority, some of these other, what you might call development agencies. It also does workman's comp, I think even for the library, I'm not sure about that. So so if there's a lawsuit, we're talking most interested in settlement. So if there's a settlement, once a settlement is reached, the city councilor, I think, tells the comptroller, and the comptroller sees to it the money goes out of PFPC to pay the settlements and judgments as well. So that's how that works. One thing I could say something?
Sure,
Related
yes.
to this subject? One of the things that has troubled me is there are, with the exception of the police department, there are no written policies for when the city will indemnify a city employee who is sued and when the city will represent a city employee who is sued. There are for the police department. They're only because the Board of Police Commissioners, back when it ran the police department, established such written procedures. And I think that this is something that ideally would be addressed by ordinance. You would establish when and under what circumstances city employees would be indemnified for settlements and judgments, and you would establish a policy when and under what circumstances the city councilor would represent a city employee who is sued. As it is, it's just kind of, we wing it. I mean, it's a practical matter. It's a rare circumstance where the city councilor would not represent a city employee who was sued. It's a rare circumstance where the city did not indemnify a city employee who was sued, but it really ought to be a written policy.
I agree.
So I guess I departed from.
No, we need
subject,
this.
but,
No, we need input, because the reason why we don't do some of these things, we don't know.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of suggestions that we need from the city council. If you know of things that we need to be addressing,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know what you don't know. In fact, you never know what you don't know, okay?
Yeah, who said that? That was,
Megan, now what was her name? Megan Kelly, about
Oh.
the recent,
I was thinking Donald Rumsfeld. He said,
Oh.
known unknowns, unknown unknowns.
well, Megan Kelly just said it about the lady who came out and accused Tom Brokaw, and all the women supported Tom Brokaw, and Megan Kelly said, you don't know what you don't know, and that is exactly right.
So anyhow, so if the city is sued or a city employee is sued, the city councilor makes a judgment. Almost always, I will represent the person, and if a settlement is reached, it's the city councilor who makes that decision, whether to settle the case, and it's paid out of PFPC. So that's the way it works.
Finished? Anyone have any questions? I'm gonna go in order. Okay, Alderman Cohen,
I have no questions.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Just a couple, Mr. Bush. I guess, what is the average, I guess in the past year, or 2 years, or do you know, what is the average payout from the city on lawsuits from the police department?
All right, Alderman Green asked me that last winter, and so I brought the letter.
Oh, okay.
And let me say, there's a complication in that before local control, when claims arose, a portion of those judgments was paid by the state. We were on the hook for some of it, the state was on the hook for some of it. But even today, there are a declining number, but there are still some cases that arose from the behavior of the police board. In fact, there was a very substantial settlement reached. I can't remember the name of the person, but you remember there was a Corey Cutter was murdered in Lafayette Square 30 years ago, and some guy, he spent over 20 years in prison.
Yes.
And he was ultimately exonerated. That was a large judgment. That goes back 25 years ago, so you never really know when these things might show up. But in general, the portion, when there's judgments against police officers, the proportion of those is going to, it's borne by the city, as opposed to the state, it's gonna be going up and up, and eventually it'll all be paid for by the city. So let me see here. Here is what I told Alderman Green in January. The first full fiscal year, the city's Division of Police operated as successor to the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department was the fiscal year that began July 1st, 2014, which is known as FY15. I understand, I've obtained these figures from Beverly Fitzsimmons of the Comptroller's Office, that the sums PFPC has paid out that fiscal year and the 2 subsequent fiscal years now complete generally, and those arising from the police force activities specifically are as follows. For FY15, I'm going to round out these numbers, $126,000 for Division of Police, in other words, city control activities, and $1.3 million for the Metropolitan Police Department.
Can I stop you for a minute? Can
Yeah.
you reduce this in writing so that we don't all have to take notes? So, I mean, you know, if you already have it in a letter, can you just, if you will, email,
Or I can
email
make
it
a
to.
copy of that real quick.
I didn't know, is there anything in there you don't, okay. All
I
right.
was asking all these same
Okay,
questions,
so
trying to
it
figure out
just
how
doesn't
this
make sense
works.
for us to be writing it all down if you already have it written down, or you can email
But
it.
I'm just, as I just handed over to Lou, I did notice that the most recent fiscal year, it was about 1.8 million for police activities. But we got some big judgments coming up, with it's, you know, especially that Lafayette Square thing, that's like 8 million, whatever, it's a lot of money.
Oh, okay.
It's a, yeah, I mean, the guy spent 20 years in prison.
While we're waiting for him to make a copy, so I want to throw this out. I've been doing a lot of research. You and I, when we practice law, what do we have to have? Professional liability insurance. I've been doing a lot of research, and a lot of cities and states now are starting to require their police to have liability insurance, such as these things.
I've seen advocates for that. I really don't have an opinion about it. Obviously, if we chose not to indemnify the police officers and they had to purchase their own insurance, you know, I believe that would be a considerable expense in order to attract people to work for your police department when they're on their own for getting insurance. You have to pay them more. So indirectly, the city would be paying for it because you'd have to compensate them. You have to give them additional compensation to attract them if they had to buy their own insurance. I've seen people who are advocates of it because they say if you have a bad cop, they won't be able to get insurance. You know, they'll have to leave the profession. The insurance companies will police them, like they, well, you know. But I have no, well, that's a good way to proceed. I have no opinion about it.
Well, what I was asking in relationship to, since the city self-insures, would that be any way, would that prevent us if that's something we wanted to pursue? Because I understand the argument about we might have to pay them more. But also the people who are involved in these shootings might think once, twice, 3 times before they think that when my husband has this, that it's a gun, or if my husband has this, this is a gun. And I use it very personally. I thought that was a gun. I have never seen so many trained professionals. If we were given that excuse practicing law, we would be disbarred, okay?
Right, that is, I've heard people say that. If you required police officers to get insurance, if they had a bad record, they would not be able to get insurance.
Right.
And then that would be a way that you would get rid of bad cops. I've heard that argument. It's a subject I have no opinion about. It's
Okay.
a complicated thing.
But I just want to know,
But there
could
are
we
such-
have it while we are self-insured? Is that something, do you think,
Well, what
anticipate
you-
that being a problem?
Well, what I've said was, we don't have a written policy
Okay,
regarding, well, we do have a written policy with police officers, oddly enough, but we don't, I mean, the city does not have to pay judgments obtained against city employees. If a city garbage collector runs over somebody, they have to pay it. If a member of the Board of Aldermen
Right.
was sued, I mean, the city doesn't have to pay that judgment, they can say you're on your own.
Right.
We don't, but we could. But it would be a less attractive thing to be a city employee, and so all things being equal, if you would need to pay people more money so they could buy insurance, because I'm sure if we had a policy that you were not going to indemnify police officers, you would have a very hard time attracting people to work on the police department.
and I don't say
Unless you
that,
pay them enough for them to get private insurance.
or maybe we pay part of it, and and so I don't have all the kinks worked out, but at some point, we didn't have this when I first started practicing law, where people would, maybe we just didn't know about it. People were shooting people, and their sole excuse is unarmed people. I thought that they were armed. I think that has become much too a common excuse, and you're not very well trained if you think that everybody that's black and male has a gun, and you don't wait for any kind of engagement. My sister spent 23 years in the Air Force. My family is a military family. All of them have instructions when they've been to war, from the Korean War on, Vietnam War. I had two uncles, and they have instructions about when they can shoot at people, even when people have guns. Since we have in this state a law that allows people to carry guns, me being frightened simply because you have a gun is not an excuse anymore. Now, it was something I did not want, and I have lobbied against because I don't like guns, but the law allows me or anybody else to have a gun. And so then to be able to, for a police officer to say, I was frightened because a black male had a gun, is not enough for me. And so we have to look at some other ways to hold them accountable. You're talking about how expensive it is, but if you're talking about now, we may have to pay lots of money for what happened during the protests this past summer. Is it 2 years ago now? Whenever it was, okay. Whenever it was. We're gonna have to look at some different things and try to have some rules about shooting a gun. And even if you get off criminally, then the city comes back and we're settling these things. And we have Mr. Franks in here, and he said that he had to approve all settlements. Is that how you understand it?
No, he doesn't approve all settlements.
He does not approve all settlements?
No.
So is that through the city councilor's office?
Right.
Okay, and he doesn't have anything to say about it?
I'm not saying he wouldn't have anything to say about it.
Like a personnel.
Personnel matter, let's say a city employee is fired, brings a civil service appeal.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible he might be consulted, I'm not aware, but certainly, if we get sued because, a sidewalk is uneven and somebody trips and falls,
That doesn't go through him?
oh, no.
So that's strictly the city councilor?
Yes,
So you don't know,
I think he misspoke or there was a miscommunication. He knows he doesn't do that.
well, okay, because
wouldn't wanna
he
do
says
that.
he has a list of he's providing us the list of all the settlements. So how would he have that?
I think he must be, I don't think he is gonna provide you a list of all settlements.
Okay.
I think he may be providing you with a list of all settlements involving,
Personnel,
personnel, yeah.
Okay,
He was on the same wavelength, because all he thinks about personnel, he thought everything you probably were asking about was personnel. 'Cause that's what he thinks about, personnel. That's
no,
his
I
favorite.
specifically asked him about just what I sent to you. I'm very specific about what I asked him about the police and the settlement, and he sat here for 2 hours just where you're sitting. But okay, this is why you have more than one person. Okay,
Yeah.
so so do you have a list of settlements then?
I could provide you with a list.
Then I'll send you a request for that.
Yeah.
Okay, in the last 4 to 5 years or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Were you asking a question?
I have a
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, right.
No, that basically, so I guess my point being, I know the state paid a pretty good portion of lawsuits at one time, settlements when it was under state control. So it sounds like to me, this cost may just keep going up, and it is costing us money.
Yes,
It's
yes.
costing us
Yes.
more money, I think, than anybody ever thought by
Yes.
having city control.
Exactly.
So hindsight being 2020, as the superstations were in 1988, you know, it was a bad move.
Well, some people might say, be careful what you wish for.
Right, exactly. But no, and that's my point. I mean, we're struggling as a city now, and, you know, we all know we have bad policemen, but we have 99.9% that are really good. It's just not fair that we're stuck paying all this money now, because I just don't think it's fair. We have enough problems of our own. So Kansas City went under city control at one time. And if you read it, after a few years it went back under state control. It just was too costly for Kansas City. So-
Well, I do think it's fair. I mean, if it's our police department and it's our employees, it's fair that, you know, we don't do a good job that we pay for it. It is fair. That's my opinion.
Oh, and I respect your opinion. I've known you too long. But thank you, Mr. Bush. Megan and I was thinking alike when I asked her.
Great
Alderwoman
minds
Gr-
think alike.
Alderwoman Green?
Couple of questions. What would happen if, for some reason, there was a large settlement and the settlement fund was drained? Would we then have to find money in
It
the
happens all the
budget?
time,
Okay.
actually, even large or small. As I understand, in recent years, the amounts of money appropriated in those two lines, PFPC contribution, have often been insufficient to pay all judgments. It wasn't, not necessarily even a large judgment, you can have cumulatively a lot of small judgments. The comptroller shoveled more money over to PFPC, I believe with the agreement of Board B and A. They transfer money from other line items into these line items and shovel some money in.
Okay. Are you aware of, and maybe this is something we need to investigate, other systems that, because it seems like there should be some way to incentivize not doing some of these things that result in settlements. And right now, if the city's just always paying it out,
Right.
you know, what's the incentive to change police tactics or whatever? Are there things you think that we could do to kind of mitigate some of that?
Well, the things that we thought about, I don't endorse them necessarily, but I think there are things to think about. I mean, instead of putting these two line items in the city councilor's budget, you could have a line item in every budget. So if a judgment was rendered against, let's, the Board of Aldermen, it would come out of your budget. And so that would be something you would be unhappy with.
Right.
Somebody, you know, or the street department, or the police
Right.
department. If it came out of your own personal budget and you felt that might be an incentive to try to run your department in a way that there would be less liability, less likelihood of liability. I'm not endorsing that, but that would be something one might think about. You know, there should be, I think most major corporations, and we are a major corporation, you know, they have systems in place to limit liability. They're very concerned about safety, for example, because of their employees. They don't want to be hit with a lot of workman's compensation claims. They, you know, and we should have, I'm not saying we should, but I mean, you know, there would make sense to, where it's, I'm sure we do. The Department of Personnel, I believe, I don't know this, they do have safety programs to make sure that we have a safe workforce so we aren't exposed to workman's compensation liability. The police department, as we've been talking about, that's an expanding source of settlements. So it would be important that the police department have systems in place to limit the city's exposure to liability. I mean, there'd be limits to how, I mean, you don't want the police department to operate in such a way as they're never gonna, to say, we're gonna operate so they will never be exposed to liability. That way they would never leave the police station. No, we don't want that. But you want them to have reasonable practices to limit exposure to liability. And they have systems in place. They have internal affairs. And you've created, I think, a more vigorous civilian oversight board. Those are ways of addressing these things. There may be other ways, but yes, you want a police department consistent with public safety to operate in a way that the exposure to liability is less rather than more. And I think the board has made a judgment that the systems are inadequate. That's why you've given more teeth to the civilian oversight board. That's your judgment, and you know, if that operates as you hope that it will, I would hope that our exposure to these large settlements would be diminished. You may have other ideas. I don't have other ideas, but there may be other ideas out there.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
So the largest lawsuits, are they from the police department? Would you say that, are those the largest settlements?
Well, the one with the guy who's in prison for 22 years, that's a big settlement.
Okay.
I don't know that we have anything like that. But you know, personnel problems, you can get some, personally, I get very nervous about them. You know, the city of St. Louis has a reputation as being a plaintiff's venue. We have, plaintiffs like to bring their cases in the city of St. Louis because there's this view that city jurors will give away a lot of money for nothing. And in my experience, I was on the bench for 22 years, I really think by and large, our city jurors were pretty responsible. But the scary cases are the personnel cases. Almost all of us are employees, we're not management. So I think people have an empathy for the employee. And I saw some really large judgments on employment cases, which I thought were maybe larger than the circumstances dictated. So they make me nervous, and they can be a source of large judgments.
Did you set any aside or reduce any?
I did.
Okay.
I did, but not often. Not often.
Okay, and do the city councilors have to carry insurance to work as a lawyer?
No.
No, so we cover them. What about doctors?
Well, you cover them, your city councilors are just like aldermen and street workers. There is no written policy. But.
Okay.
And I'm not aware of anybody in the office ever being sued, but there is no written policy, but under the custom, the city would pay.
Okay, what about doctors? What
Do
about doctors?
Do we still have doctors that work?
No, but we have, oh, okay, I guess all the doctors are gone now, that's right.
But
Okay, we have
there are certain parts. of the
medical people, like the fire department and EM.
I don't know,
Okay.
I'm not aware of insurance, but I am aware that there are certain portions of city government where there are liability policies. At the airport has liability policies. I'm not sure who it covers, but I believe there are such things. And there may be some other parts of city government where there is insurance. I'm sure there is. I'm not sure who they are, but I've heard people from time to time talk about there's insurance for this or insurance for that. But that's the exception, not the rule. Most of us are not covered by anything.
Okay, and you talked about, which I think is a good idea, so right now, you would not be upset if we took and moved from the budget, the settlement for the police and put it under the police budget, so that people would know that.
I don't have an opinion about it. I'm just saying that's something that could be thought about.
Right.
There
There is no real reason for it to have to, so I guess my real question is there any real reason for it to have to stay under the city council where people don't know it versus?
There might be, because when I make a settlement, in other words, if I enter a settlement agreement, I have got to have funds to pay for it, and so if it's not my budget, it could be disputed what my authority is. I don't have I say I don't have an answer to this. This requires thought.
Okay.
You know, if I were you, I'd want to hear what Paul Payne has to say about it.
Oh, we're gonna talk to Mr. Payne.
But I'm saying it's something that's worthy of thought. I don't have a position on it.
Okay,
I don't know what would be best.
okay. Alderwoman Green, you had another question?
Yes, I was just wondering, do you have a list of, probably not, but a list of policies that you think that we should have that we don't have, that could maybe be some kind of guiding document for this committee of,
I
a
don't
normal
have-
city would have these
We-
things and we, to protect ourselves from liability and
We just about
we
done.
don't, so we might want to investigate it.
I don't, but I think, you know, people, like insurance companies, you know, they want, if we went out to buy insurance to cover all employees, I'll bet the insurance company would tell us what we ought to do, you know, to minimize exposure. But I don't know what that would be, but I bet they'd have some ideas. I'm not encouraging us to buy this enormous insurance policy that would cost $1 zillion, but there are people who know how to do those things, have ideas about them. It doesn't include me. What I would say, what I would hope that, from my personal point of view, I would strongly encourage you, as I've encouraged you before, to start to work up a policy on indemnification and representation, and in general, update the city code provisions that pertain to the city councilor, which are out of date, sometimes decades out of date.
Any further questions? Alderman Cohen?
No.
Alderwoman?
Thank you, I don't.
Okay, it's been a little longer than we thought. You said you had something to bring to my attention. Do you
Oh,
want to do that?
I took my opportunity to do that already.
Okay.
A couple of times. I bet the updating the city code is
Okay.
basically the thing I mostly have.
But you have some specific codes that need updated that you could send.
If you look at, there's,
Oh, I love you already. I think you're, I mean,
chapter 3.10.
okay,
That regulates the law department, and you wouldn't have to read very far on that to see that it's out of date.
okay.
You know, as I said, it refers to buildings that no longer exist.
And I'm gonna,
Courts that no longer exist.
And I'm gonna turn that back over to you to say, send us a written thing of what needs to be updated, and we'll turn that into a nice little ordinance and
I'd
do
be
that.
happy to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay, you can send that to me. I'll be
Okay.
the sponsor. Come before this committee. We can get that done really fast.
Mhm.
Great.
Okay?
All right.
I appreciate it. You're gonna get an email from me from some things I asked about, okay? And thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I had one of the members who just left said it was a great hearing, and I like that because we are on a fact-finding mission. And you actually came in here and told us something that needs to be done, that changed. So that's what we're looking forward to doing.
All right, well, thank you for inviting me, and the last thing I will say is one of the things you're going to ask for is a list of settlements going back X number of years. I'm pretty sure we can do it, but I'm pretty sure we can't do it real quickly.
I didn't say quickly.
Depending on how far back you want to go.
I was a public defender, okay, and I still am at my heart. So, when I came over here, I was just in amazement what the city councilors have. Okay, so when you get it done, and remember, at the Board of Aldermen, we share a secretary right now, 6 or 7 people, and my office is no bigger than that part of the desk. So, we know how to do without here at the Board of Aldermen.
All right.
Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, I move to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.